Hello everyone, welcome to this fun little tutorial. We're going to look at 3 trees. The last one's a little bit rough around the edges, but it's got glimmers of a good idea, so I'm going to share it with you. Please leave me a comment and let me know what else you would like to see, what really spoke to you in this tutorial, what you'd like me to expand on. That really helps me. Be sure to like this tutorial either on YouTube and or on Patreon so I know you're interested in it, because I really do look at how many likes each post gets, and then I base where I go sometimes on what people really enjoyed the most. So that really helps me when you use those likes and those comments to give me feedback. I really love to hear from you, so that really helps. So I hope you'll do that. We're going to paint 3 very different Christmas trees. I'm going to start by painting this on bow hung cold press paper, about an 8x10 format, so I have plenty of room to swish around and have fun. I'm going to use my typical palette of French Ultramarine, Winsor Green Gold, Permanent Green Light, Cobalt Blue, maybe a little bit of Aureolin, and I like these colors because they're really granulating, so they really add a lot of character to this painting. Also, I'm going to use what's called a striper brush, and it's made by Silver Black Velvet. It's very similar to a dagger brush, and what makes this brush fun to work with for this kind of painting is you can get really calligraphic brush strokes from it. What do I mean by that? That means in one stroke you can go from wide to thin, really swishy, and they really are very organic and lively looking brush strokes. So when you hear me say calligraphic, that's kind of what I mean. They're thick and then they're thin and swoopy and swirly, just like calligraphy is. And there's a lot of dynamic movement and energy in the brushwork because of that. So I really had fun playing with this brush, and I really need to remember to pull this brush out more often. And maybe I will this Christmas season. So, all right, now let's look at the footage. All right, so what you see me doing first is I paint a watery line straight down, because your tree tip and your trunk usually are going to line up pretty well. So that's a good thing to do just with clear water to help you remember to line your tree up so it's not crooked and the tip is nice and over the trunk. Usually that's how you paint a tree. And I start out with a mix of Winsor Green Gold, and I'm putting a little bit of French Ultramarine in there. And this is almost cream consistency, but it's still watery enough, milky enough to get these swishy brush strokes. And every stroke or so, what you're going to see me do is change the color in my brush. And the name of the game is to make some brush strokes not only different in color, but in value. And so sometimes I mush this brush, and sometimes I lift it up as I move through the stroke to a light touch, and then I disconnect it for some of the tips, and then you'll see me flick it. So I'm just playing with all different kinds of brush strokes, and this is a great way to get to know this brush. This is one of the first times I've ever painted with this brush, so I'm just kind of feeling it out and seeing what I can do with it, and using different pressures and the side of it and the tip of it. And I really liked the feel of it. So again, that last brush stroke had more Permanent Green Light. And then I found it made a really cool flick effect, which I think really adds some energy to this painting and gives it a really organic feel. So I like that. I was trying to flick it some more here and it didn't flick. You have to have just the right amount of paint in your brush. And here I go in with almost tea consistency. I'm trying to get a really light color. One of my challenges with Christmas trees and trees like that is I get them all a medium value. You really don't want that. You want lights, mediums, and darks in obvious changes in value, not just color, but value. So later you'll see me do some lifting and painting with lighter, I think I blot actually to get lighter areas, because even though I added a lot of water to my brush, it still came out pretty pigmented. There I have a little bit of ultramarine added. That's really deep and rich. And as you go down the tree, in general, you're going to get in more shadow. So I kind of imagine a tree would have more dark shadows in the bottom. So that's how I painted this, with more pure French ultramarine towards the bottom. And I just work from the same puddle and just continue to add different colors to my puddle and different amounts of water to my puddle to get different brush strokes in their color and also in their value. There I'm splatting on some water to see if I can get a little bit of cauliflower texture. And here I'm going in with almost completely clean, clear water to attach my tree into the painting. You really want to do that. And here I add some pure cobalt blue. I'm imagining snow, but that's the thing. You don't want this tree to look like a cutout. So to make it look like it's ingrained into the painting, attach it here at the bottom with almost clean, clear water for a disappearing edge at the bottom. And then just fidgeting about and playing and adding a little bit of dynamic little swishy strokes just to play. Here I'm lifting some paint to get lighter values. I can see that it's all kind of a medium value, such a beginner move. I look back at some of my older Christmas trees, they're all medium value throughout the tree. You don't want that. You want lighter areas to make it look airy and watercolory and dreamy. So while this is still wet, you can't do it when it's dry. You got to do it when it's wet and not super wet, but half wet. Buckling. You go in with a thirsty brush by cleaning out your brush, wringing it out so it's damp and clean, and then you can lift out some color. And I suggest just doing it in a few areas. And look how much dreamier that looks. It looks like light is coming through it now. And that's one of the beautiful things about watercolor is that transparent look. You just can't get that with any other medium, but you have to get your lights in to get that effect. Just splattering some energy on there. This is some tree energy. Maybe it's some early wintry flurries energy. I don't know, but I just feel like it adds a beautiful forest energy to the piece to have some little flicks of paint. There is my permanent green light. Pretty pure milk consistency. I'm splatting that on now. You could also splat on white ink or white gouache with a little water added to it, or white watercolor paint. You could put a cardinal in your tree. You could put a star. Here I'm putting a very fine little delicate, almost whisper thin topper on it. And that really gives it some nice energy. All right, I'm just adding a little bit more clear water down at the bottom to attach the tree into my painting. And notice how with windmill principle edges, that gives us some light on light edges. There's some light boughs in the tree against the light background. So at least we have two of the windmill principle edges. All right, I want to do a pre-play of this next painting because it's a little mind-blowing to paint this way. And the reference that I used was a painting I found on the internet. Thank you to Doriana Popa for letting me paint for her from her tree reference. I really love her work. I gave her a little donation of $10 as well through her Instagram account, which is xxdoriana, which means Kiss Kiss Doriana. And be sure to go check out her art. And thank you so much for Doriana Popa for allowing me to share this painting with you guys that I did from being inspired by her tree painting. But I'm going to let you use my painting as a reference, just like I used a painting I found probably on Pinterest as a reference. And basically what we're doing is painting around snow. This is painting the shadows and the bits of the tree that stick out from the snow. And I just love the effect of this. So I wanted to share it with you because it's such a unique way to paint. You're painting the negative shapes of darks around the snow is what you're doing. And it's really effective and looks really great. So let's go ahead and look at the slowed down regular time footage. It doesn't really matter the green you use. Just make sure it's not a screaming green. If you're painting from sap green from the tube, for example, add a little red. And then have a puddle that you work from and add a little yellow, then add a little ultramarine, and then add a little red, and then add a little water, and then, because you want some lights, some darks, and a little bit of mediums to add interest to your tree. You don't want it to be all one flat color and one flat value. That's the basic rule behind painting trees and lots of other things. At all cost, avoid your painting being mostly medium values. And I still make this mistake. I still catch myself doing this. I'm still learning too, y'all. And isn't that the fun part? If you embrace it. Sometimes it can be frustrating. It's like, oh, I know not to do that. I did it again. But anyway, I'm using my striper brush again. And I was really enjoying playing with this brush, and it kind of is a little floppy. So it takes away a little bit of control. So some of these brush marks are a little bit out of control, a little bit, but I can also get little fine tips. And thick areas and thin areas. And so you really got to focus on painting the shapes, not what you think you see. This really forces you to paint what you really see, not what you think you see. So there's some marks that are just little like dots and dashes and V's off by themselves, and other parts are attached to the other shapes that we're painting. But the thing to keep in mind is that they're always really random. And here I'm making a lighter mark. And you see, as I move through the tree, I'm changing the color in my brush. This is just so delicate and just... See, there I'm adding some ultramarine blue. Because I never want the same color throughout the tree. So I would encourage you, this is probably going to blow some of your minds because it's such a different way to paint. So try it more than once. At least try it more than once. And to help you stay on course, you can draw a line down the middle of the tree first, unlike what I did. So that'll help you keep your tree straight. Of course, as you go down the tree, it gets wider. These brush strokes are really light. So to get lighter brush marks, just add more water. And some brush marks, make them totally gray. It will look really pretty. Like this is almost completely gray. And I just get a gray by mixing in junk off my palette. It's not scientific. It's just whatever is laying there that is kind of across the color wheel from green. Burnt sienna, naphthol red, purple. Those all make really nice gray greens. So these are really light marks here. I just added some black to my paint there. But it's pretty watery, so it's nice. It's a nice lighter medium tone black. But that little brush stroke has a lot of water in it, so, and that's almost pure water. So for some of these brush marks, you want to rinse out your brush almost completely, and then you'll have a gray light color. One thing I will say, you want a few little dots and dabs like I have, but you want to connect a lot of them. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm kind of creating some connection between some of the little dots and dabs. You want a few little dabs, but most of it you want connected to each other in some way. And that's a general rule of painting too. And then you just look at what your tree needs. Step away from it, look at it from a distance and see, does it look balanced? That's kind of what I'm doing here, adding a few little end points that are a little more pointy at the tips. Getting the tips a little bit more pointy here. And then all of a sudden a tree emerges. It's like, how did I do that? I was just painting these little abstract little pieces parts, and then it all comes together. And the name of the game is to paint the shapes that you see. So a lot of little upside down V's that are spread out, almost like birds flying abstractly. If you look at some of these brush marks that go across a tree, they look like abstracted birds flying. How fun is that? I want to show you an admittedly half-baked idea that I'd like to build on. I'll show this footage sped up a bit and just discuss my creative process I'm using to explore new ideas, which is a very important part of the artistic journey. So let's embrace and explore half-baked ideas, because that is partly where your individual style will germinate. All right, so what you see here is a stencil. Isn't that fun? Already I'm having fun, and I went a little crazy buying these stencils, so I need to use them. So what I'm using is Magic Eraser, and I love this idea. But do notice, they show up best when I'm using darker paint underneath. Also, what's really important for using this technique is having dark enough paint where the stencils that you use to erase paint, they won't show up if you try erasing these out of light painted areas, which you'll see in a minute. So I'm using Magic Eraser. I'm also using good watercolor paper, cold press watercolor paper that will take this scrubbing, and I'm using non-staining paints. Namely, ultramarine blue is the best one to have in your mix, because ultramarine blue is, one, a darker blue color, and two, very non-staining. So it's very amenable to this way of erasing with a stencil and Mr. Clean Magic Eraser. I mean, I really love this idea and I want to play with it. This idea doesn't work great on these Christmas trees because I didn't paint these Christmas trees with this idea in mind. I just came up with this half-baked idea and thought, well, what would happen if I tried to add little ornaments to these trees after they're finished? And of course, they have to be perfectly dry to do this. And I really like that at least you're able to see the little snowflakes or flowers or whatever it is. I guess these are snowflakes. They really are showing up. And now I'd like to take this half-baked idea to the next level and paint a background with this idea in mind and see what I can do with it. So this is where your style is going to emerge from thinking outside the box, thinking of new ideas and trying them out. And there's all kinds of stencils out there. And I warn you, you might go crazy buying stencils. So I have a lot of stencils that just gather a lot of dust. So I'm not saying go out and buy a bunch of stencils. The point of me showing you this footage is more about showing you how to come up with new ideas individual to your own style and your own artistic creative process, and how to work through them. They won't all work out, but if you don't try your new ideas and experiment and play, then you're not going to develop your own style. So that's kind of more the point even than doing these stencils and Christmas trees. But by all means, knock yourself out, try them out, and come up with your own ideas and do share so we can all learn from each other. But I'll probably do more of these, so stay tuned for more. I hope you enjoyed this little tutorial. It's so chock full of good little lessons that you just didn't know were even in the process, right? Like using the gray in the second tree that we did, and having grays in your painting to really make your colors sing. And I just think that's a really interesting lesson as well. So I hope you got a lot from this tutorial. And thank you so much for watching. Now go watercolor your world. Bye, everybody.